Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we are discussing all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our personal and spiritual development journeys. My name is Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a channeler, energy healer, tarot reader, astrologer, and soul alignment coach. My mission in my work and in this podcast is to help teach people how to shift their consciousness, how to heal, and how to release beliefs and patterns and fears of their ego mind so that they can step into alignment with their soul to live lives of abundance, purpose, and bliss. In these episodes, I will be sharing either through my own lens and my own channel or through the experiences of my guest, wisdom and expertise about healing, spirituality, psychology, personal growth, holistic wellness, mysticism, consciousness, and so much more. My hope is that these conversations help you feel seen and provide support and inspiration for you with your own personal breakthroughs. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back, everybody, to Breakthroughs with Bree. Today, we have a very special guest. She is a nutritionist and burnout coach, the co-founder of the Happy Hormone Club and podcast, which has built a global community that supports women healing from burnout and fatigue to be able to find vitality, passion, and health again. Welcome to the podcast, Danielle.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
I'm so excited to have you. Danielle and I have worked together, and I was on her podcast not too long ago. And so it feels very long overdue to be able to have you on to talk about your area of expertise. But before we get into that, let's go through the fun rapid fire questions that I do with all of my guests so that my audience can get to know a little bit about you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
She's like, yep, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Let's do
Okay,
it.
so first, go ahead and tell us your pronouns and where you are located in the world.
Sure. I'm she, her, and I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Love. Do you want to start by telling us your life path number in numerology?
So I'm a 4.
Yes, we just looked this up.
So I'm a 4. We just looked it up. I'm a Capricorn Rising, which is very fitting. I'm a very Capricorn type gal.
And a Capricorn Sun and a Cancer Moon, which I'm going to give her a little mini astrology reading right now because she's never really looked at her astrology. And I just feel like that'd be really fun. So we have a Capricorn Sun, Rising, Cancer Moon. And then what is your human design profile?
So I'm a 4-6 generator.
Love. And then have you ever done a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram?
I have. I'm trying to remember. I think I'm an ENFJ.
Nice. And then I do believe that you have your colors confirmed by Mystic Michaela.
I do. I'm a yellow blue, but apparently I'm like a chill yellow.
Ooh, we love a chill
But
yellow.
I definitely like to do my little yellow thing, as Michaela did say.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I really relate to.
I love a blue yellow. I just love the energy of blue yellow auras. So that's really cool. And then finally, do you by chance know or guess what your Harry Potter Hogwarts house would be?
Yeah, I'm curious. What do you think I'd be?
I feel like you'd be a Hufflepuff.
You're right.
Yes.
I just did the quiz before we hopped on because I was curious myself. I thought it was going to be something a little bit more badass, like Slytherin, but it kind of makes perfect sense that it's not.
I feel like you are a Hufflepuff wing Ravenclaw, if I was going to guess. Your secondary would probably be Ravenclaw. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was going through, I definitely wasn't picking the darker stuff. So it does make sense. It's probably a bit later.
Oh my gosh,
cats
that's funny.
and sunshine, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm a Hufflepuff too, so no shade. I love it. Okay, so let's go back to your birth chart. For those of you who don't know, I started Healing with Bree doing birth chart readings for people, which was really just looking at their the basics of their birth chart, walking them through their big three and their placements and explaining all of that kind of stuff to them. And I want to do that a little bit for you because one, Danielle is a past client of mine, so I like treat my people really good. I want to give her a little bit of insight. And two, I just feel like that'd be fun since I haven't done that much on a podcast. So let's take a minute to do that. So first of all, Danielle, if her birth time is correct, she's still going to double check all of that, but she is a Capricorn rising and Capricorn sun. And she also has her Mercury, the planet of thinking and communication, conjunct her sun. Conjunct means that they're sitting right next to each other in the sky and on her chart. So her Mercury and sun, very combined, sort of synergetic energy. So has all of that in Capricorn Capricorn. And then opposing her sun is a Cancer moon, which means that she was born around a full moon, because full moons are when the sun and the moon are opposed in the sky. So she has a lot of really strong Capricorn energy. She also has her Neptune in Capricorn, which gives her what we would call a Capricorn stellium, which just again means she has a lot of really strong Capricorn energy in her chart. And then again, opposing that would be her Cancer moon. Here is how I would interpret this for you, Danielle. So you would definitely identify with all of the Capricorn lore out there. Okay. A Capricorn is an earth sign, so it's very practical, it's very reliable, it's very grounded. So the thing about Capricorns is that they're always thinking about how can I be most efficient and resourceful in pursuit of my ambition and my goal. Like they think of what is it that I want to accomplish. They're known for being very ambitious. And how can I get there using the most efficient combination of resources, of time, of, maybe material resources, etc. Like I don't want to waste any of that on anything. Like I am laser focused. I'm like a freight train on my way to my goals, like don't even get in my way. What's funny is they also can be known for having kind of a dry sense of humor. They can be known for maybe being the people that would rather just do it themselves than to like take the time to ask and teach other people how to do it. It's just faster if I do it. It's just faster if I do it, right? That's very much a Capricorn energy, a little bit Virgo too, so I can relate, but very Capricorn. They can also be known for like being a little bit serious because again, they're so focused on creating the outcome. Like they are the sign of all of them that knows how to get shit done. Like they're the workhorse of the zodiac, So like when they're laser focused on what they're trying to create, the outcome they're trying to generate, like don't even get in their way. But also you would never be able to trust anybody more than a Capricorn with it. You know what I mean? Because like they're going to get it done at all costs. But the downside is that it's at all costs. You know what I mean? So, and it's really funny because Danielle and I did some coaching together. And one of the things was about like, how can I just like take like step back and like truly feel at peace enough to like kick my feet up a little bit. And that makes sense that that would feel a little bit hard for you with all of this Capricorn energy, like so much Capricorn energy. Like the sun is where we feel vitality and things that are important. And you get vitality from working, like you get vitality from applying your energy to a goal, and really a goal that is going to like benefit other people too, because all of the earth signs kind of have a little bit of that service like orientation. I'm creating something material that can be useful or enjoyable to other people, So I'm going to pause before I talk about your Cancer moon. Does that Capricorn stuff relate to you? Does that resonate?
Yeah, like I have to laugh because, well, you know me because we've worked together and I'm a burnout coach. Like this is something that's impacted my life in so many ways. So I see that it's something that I've always been kind of trying to rein in and balance. Yeah, everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah. Except for the seriousness and the dry sense of humor. I feel like I feel like I like to like shine away from that one a little bit, but there is like a seriousness within me for sure.
Yeah,
It's very cool.
like you take what you do seriously. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's that kind of energy. Here are some other fun things about your chart. So even you saying you have a little bit of levity, you have your Mars and Aries and your Venus and Sagittarius. So you have some like fire sign energy, which is a little bit more like spontaneous and fun and lively, very like inspired, So I feel like you have some of that fire fueling some of that Capricorn, which again is like channeling all of this energy. I will say your fire signs probably get a little bit like, don't limit me. I want to be free, like that's probably one area where like fire signs and earth signs kind of like differ, but that makes sense. But I want to talk about your Cancer moon just for a second, because again, it makes so much sense what you do. So Cancer and Capricorn are polar opposites in the zodiac, but polars in the zodiac are not actually true opposites. They're the same energy expressed in opposite directions, right? So there is a friction to them because they're like either ends of a spectrum, essentially, but like the core is the same. Okay. Cancer is all about nurturing. It's all about safety. It's all about like emotional sensing and responding, right? It's a water sign. It's emotional, it's intuitive, it's very sensitive, it's very psychic too. To have a water sign moon means you probably got some psychic stuff going on, which you definitely have a lot of intuitive sort of like gifts, But I would say with this placement in your chart, with your moon sign opposing your Capricorn stellium and the moon representing what is emotionally fulfilling or sort of like your vulnerable side or like your intuitive self and that sort of thing, is at your core, you actually probably feel most connected and fulfilled when you're giving yourself the opportunity to nurture your needs and also probably nurture the needs of other people, that is actually like where you feel the most connected, when like you are creating a sense of safety in your own life and also probably like a sense of safety with other people. But you use your Capricorn skills, you use your Capricorn orientation to go about accomplishing that purpose of your moon sign, right? So again, like you being a burnout coach, like you understand what it is to want to drive yourself into the ground and having the tendency of wanting to go, 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 and maybe, thinking that your productivity is your worth or whatever, because that Capricorn energy really embodies that. But the Cancer being sort of the opposite balance is like, wait a minute, like, do you feel good? Like, are you taking care of your body? Are you paying attention to your emotions and your mental health? Are you nourishing your relationships? Like, how do you feel in all of the things that are doing? Are you able to connect with people in your life the way that you want to, right? Like, there's a wisdom and a perspective from that Cancer side that I feel like probably grounds and gives perspective to all of your Capricorn placements, and also gives a very like nurturing and wise perspective for you to offer your clients.
Yeah. A nice balancer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me. That's so cool.
Does that resonate for
I'm
you?
gonna worm gonna it does a lot. Totally gonna wormhole down more like astrology stuff. I'm hungry to learn more.
Yeah. And my last thing that I'll mention for you is that you have a Scorpio midheaven and you have your Pluto on your midheaven too, which is a really interesting placement. So the midheaven has to do with the legacy that we're going to leave, and a lot of times can have to do with our career, because usually like the legacy we leave has to do with the service that we like put outward to the community. Scorpio is all about finding the truth, like that emotional, psychological, like truth of what is really happening and how you work with people. Like you're really trying to get to the root of what's going on, like the truth of what's going on. There's that sort of like emotional investigation work that Scorpios are known for. And there's a million different ways you can enact that. But anybody with a Scorpio midheaven's probably feeling that. And Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. Where you have Scorpio in your chart is a very powerful thing. Everybody in our generation shares that because Pluto moves really slowly. But what's unique to you is you have it on your midheaven. Wherever Pluto is in your chart, there's a lot of rebirth energy. There's a lot of change energy, but also where there's a lot of power and liberation. So when I see Pluto in that 10th house, especially close to the midheaven, I tend to find people who have a lot of changes in their career, a lot of changes in their mission, a lot of like evolutions of what they want to do and how they want to do it, whether it's like because they've chosen it or because the universe kind of chooses it for them and they get kind of like thrown into the next sort of thing. But I would say that that is not uncommon, that there would be a lot of rebirths of what your career or your impact or your legacy is based on having that Pluto so close to your midheaven.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Do you feel like you've already experienced that a little bit? Like a lot of different versions of like what you do for like a job or like how you help people?
Definitely. Like I feel like career wise, like up to this point, like if I could write a resume, like from serving to commercial real estate, where I started out, to like working in clinical nutrition, just marketing, so many different hats I've worn. But I feel like it's just like an ever evolving Danielle in a way, leading
Well,
me to wherever the greater path goes.
yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Your birth chart affirms that for you. So, since
That makes sense.
before we talked, you were totally new to astrology. Now you've heard a little bit about your chart. What's your thought about astrology? How are you feeling about it? Are you feeling curious? Are you feeling like wowed? Like, what's your vibe?
Yeah, definitely curious. I feel like even with the human design and whenever I explore these things, like it all makes sense. I always feel like I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. Especially everything you just said. I just like almost can't believe it. Just what I've experienced in that Capricorn drive I've had and how it's shown up in so many different ways in my life and how I've worked on it. And the Cancer moon was really cool too. Just like having that more intuitive, nurturing wisdom kind of coming into play that I definitely feel pulls from as well. So it's just really cool. I think I need to get a book from the library and just kind of like I said, I'm probably going to wormhole on it and it's just going to be like another thing it's cool to like know about yourself in these ways.
Yeah. I think all of these personal development tools are opportunities to understand yourself better in a way that makes navigating life as you more empowering. And it gives you more tools to learn how to do it joyfully and in a healthy way. And like all of those kinds of things that I just think astrology is one of the best. What I'll recommend to you and anybody who's listening, I recommend the Time Passages app because you can literally click different components and it will explain to you not only your different like planet placements, but also different aspects. And you can also look at transits. Like I think it's one of the most comprehensive in explaining. So time passages to anybody who's curious about learning more about their chart, and for you too, Danielle. Okay, we spent a little bit of time on the birth chart reading, so I feel like now would be a good time to take a break because our topic today is exactly what you do with your clients. We're going to be talking about navigating burnout when we come back. Okay, everybody, we are back with an expert in a very common experience that people have, which is burnout, as well as fatigue, like literal, like adrenal and physical fatigue, because the two tend to go hand in hand. Danielle, I would love for you to start by telling us your understanding or how you would describe what burnout is to people who aren't sure that they're quite on the same page with us in terms of what they think it is.
Yeah, I love this question. And I was thinking about it because there's like some technical ways that you can look at burnout, like the different stages of burnout that are like true classifications that you can see depending on your symptoms. But sometimes I think it's more of a feeling. So maybe I'll speak to both a little bit. Essentially, when you get like truly burnt out, it's almost like you've lost like that inner vigor. So a lot of us, we have trouble sleeping, we wake up tired, or we go to bed, but we wake up tired anyways, like even after a full night's sleep. It's kind of that feeling like you've had a really busy week, but you need the weekend to recover, but you feel like you're never recovering. So you're always tired. And so there's a lot of different symptoms that can come into play here. Food cravings are a big one, anxiety, mood, insomnia. It starts to trickle in with other hormonal stuff as we go because your body is essentially in high drive all the time, using tons of nutrients, using tons of energy. And your body just, you get the cravings are very natural and they're very hard to not give into because like your body needs that fuel. And so a lot of the times when we're not feeling great, what I see with clients is like they're making changes with their diet, oftentimes like quite restrictive, cutting out sugar, these really rigid things maybe that we change in our lifestyle. And sometimes I see it actually as like a double-edged sword that can make things worse. So, I mean, when we go down the hormone path, when you start to get like the stress hormone imbalance along with sex hormone imbalance, this is when like symptoms really can get a little bit wild. And I find when people start reaching out for help, it's when you can no longer keep up with the way that you used to operate. So you kind of get used to operating and being a certain level of like being productive to a certain level day to day. And it's when that starts to become more difficult or we start to feel really unwell, whether it's mentally, physically, both. That's when we kind of start to reach out to like make changes. But oftentimes this has been brewing for a long time behind the scenes in just the way that we are and the way that we're behaving day to day. I guess long story short, there are different symptoms that we could look at to see like how burnt out are you and like how fatigued are you. Once you get to like the chronic fatigue, like you're really well aware because you're just tired all the time. But I think a lot of us live in that higher level of burnout where it's not that severe, but we're just kind of really high strung. We're not sleeping great and we're just kind of used to being there, but it's not always sustainable. And we all have different levels of resilience and we're all able to kind of keep that up for different amounts of time. So it's just a matter of time until when it really like shows its face or we get sick or something, we get sick and we don't recover like we thought we would and we just can't feel like we're bouncing back sort of thing.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you saying too is that like there might have been something that felt like normal, both like normal in the expectation of how much you produce and do, as well as what you thought was a normal energy level, and things start to change, right? Usually more that we expect of ourselves and less energy to do it, which creates kind of frustration and ultimately our quality of life suffers, right? Because when we're not sleeping and we're not feeling like we have as much energy, we probably start to feel things like more depressed or more anxious or just more like bitter and like kind of resentful about things, right? So like our quality of life really starts to take a nosedive along with a sense of motivation and energy for things. And that's also manifesting with physical things like cravings and, quality of sleep and all that kind of stuff. So that's really helpful to hear some of those like telltale signs. I know you mentioned that there's different like stages of burnout too. Would you tell us a little bit about what those are?
Yeah. So essentially, like the earlier stages is when we can imagine that our stress hormones are ramped up, like they're elevated. So you feel like almost that anxiousness, like you can get a lot done because your cortisol is quite high. And so you might be like tired but wired. You've got that go energy, a little bit tired, but a lot of people I find operate in that like stage 1. Then you get to stage 2 and things are starting to get a little bit more suppressed. So you can kind of imagine like cortisol's high at the beginning and you can imagine where it's going if we're going to stage 3. So in stage 3, it's often pretty low. And we can actually do tests and see how your cortisol levels fluctuate throughout the day, which is a very normal thing. In the morning, our cortisol is supposed to be high. That will wake us up and kind of get us ready to go and give us energy for the day. It's a good thing. But what we often find is either it's too low in the morning, it's almost like your curve is flipped. in the evening, cortisol is naturally low and your melatonin's higher. And this is what helps you go to sleep. So you can see when there's imbalances along this curve, if your cortisol is really high at night, it could be hard to fall asleep. Or if it's spiking too early in the night, you might have trouble with like insomnia or waking up and not being able to fall back asleep. So in stage 3, we often see that cortisol is lower. It might be just lower than normal, or it might be low across the board. And this is what you see where you're just going to feel tired all the time. And then it's going to really start to influence your sex hormones, because your stress hormones will basically be like, oh, well, ovulating, like periods, who needs them? Like fertility, we're not thinking about that. We need just these basic stress hormones because they're crucial to survival. And we're in a state of like fight or flight all the time. And so it can start like tapping into sex hormone balance in the earlier stages, but it's oftentimes when you get a little further along into the stage 2 or the stage 3 where you start to see where things are really suppressed, which is where I found myself. And it was, I can speak to my journey a little bit, but I basically learned that lesson the hard way. I had to build everything back up: sex hormones, stress hormones. And it was like over 10 years ago now. So there wasn't the resources that I had today. I found that it was like, felt really complicated and I felt really alone in it. And so I'm just so glad that there's so much more available these days to make building ourselves back up and taking better care of ourselves so much more accessible for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about the community that you've built. I know some people, and a former guest that we had on, Tina, has gotten so much community and healing of like being able to be a part of the Happy Hormone Club, previously known as Adrenal Fatigue Recovery, I think is what it is. Did I have the name right on that?
The Adrenal Recovery Collective.
That's okay. That's what it was. Now the Happy Hormones Club. And from what I learned from both what you described and what Tina described was that it was a group of, I think, primarily women who found themselves identifying with that kind of experience of like, I literally don't have energy to do my life. Maybe I don't even have motivation to, have sex, and I just don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I don't feel motivated. Finding an explanation and like, oh, wow, like this is what's going on. Finding that there is a way forward to sort of heal the systems of the body to come back online, but that takes a minute to help the body do that. And finding not only guidance and instruction and support in doing that, but also community with other people who are going through that sort of like healing and recovery process back to normal. And that felt like something that was so like incredibly supportive and positive. So for people who are curious, like what brings us to that state of burnout, of some of the things that you've described from your experience, what are the different components that are contributing to getting to that place of being burned out, regardless of the stage? Like, what are some of the main factors that take us there?
To put it simply, I often find it's like imbalances in the lifestyle that become bad habits. So it could be, and for me, it's like I want to call it habit, but like a tendency to be like an addiction to being productive. So I was like constantly like workaholic vibes, you can imagine. Like we're just pushing myself really hard work wise. And then it's like the work never stops, we're at home, we're cleaning, like we're doing house chores, projects, like these sort of things. It's like, I think that a lot of us have, that I definitely work in the Happy Hormone Club, like with a lot of type A's, like a lot of those like really driven personalities. And like I said, it's oftentimes when you can't keep up with like what you used to do before, you get really frustrated because you hold yourself to that high standard, or like these tendencies that aren't necessarily healthy are just keeping your body in a really high gear and using up so much energy and so much of your reserves that eventually you're going to burn out in whatever way that's going to look like for you. And that's the thing about stress. It manifests for all of us so differently sometimes. Yeah. Like it might not be the way what you expect. It could be fatigue. And oftentimes fatigue is the big one, but it could be like the way that we're digesting our food. It could be how we feel like emotionally. It could be our anxiety, depression, the way that we sleep. We all know like if a couple nights of bad sleep like changes the way that you handle everything. And a good night's sleep can change everything: relationships, the way that you show up for work, the way you show up for your family. So it trickles into every area of your life.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I'll say with some of the people that I work with that, find themselves in that kind of category of like pouring their energy into things without their consent anymore, like it's gotten to a point where they can't not like go, go, go. You know, there was maybe a point in time where it did feel like it was more of an choice and intention, like, yeah, I really want to do this. And it got to a point where like they are so stuck in that pattern and they're not really enjoying it anymore. And they're feeling burned out and all this kind of stuff, but like they just don't know how to reverse it anymore. Like it's gotten a little bit out of control. And I definitely identify that there's like multiple areas that are affecting it. It's like your beliefs and your mental health, your emotions and your emotional health. And then there's a huge physical component because those things start to manifest physically and sort of like add to the snowball. I know even for me, it was a huge breakthrough for me to realize that I literally was having adrenal fatigue. Like blood tests and things showed that my adrenals were way lower than they should have been. And I was like, no wonder I'm literally exhausted all the time, you know? And there, again, there was like a mental and an emotional component to that, a spiritual one as well, but like it was also physical, you know? So it makes sense that it can get to that point where it feels like this has been going on so long. This pattern is so deep rooted. Like, I don't even know how to not be this way, but it's obvious this is not working because my quality of life isn't what I want it to be, you know?
Yeah. And so I think that's what's beautiful about the work that you do. And you know, I'm all about the holistic approach. Like there's a lot you can do with food. There's a lot you can do with your lifestyle. But getting curious about what drives the fears or what drives those tendencies that are like the habits that I mentioned before that aren't supporting you when it comes to your burnout is really essential, but that's the hard work. Like it's easy to take a supplement. I mean, changing your diet, changing your lifestyle, there's challenges in that, of course. There's no denying that. But really like digging deep to see where those tendencies come from, like that's where I think the inner work and like the deep healing really comes from. And that's why I love merging all of these things together when it comes to really addressing this in a holistic way. You can take all the best supplements. And trust me, I've seen it. I worked in, supplement shops, working with one-on-one with the people coming in for years when I was in nutrition school. They were buying all the best stuff. Their diets were really clean. And you can take all the best stuff in the world, but if you're not managing your nervous system and managing yourself, you're just propping it up barely. Yeah.
Barely, 100%. I'll just share with anybody listening. Here are some signs. Like if I was working with a coaching client and in the work that I do, I'm really focusing on us being able to take cues from the triggers that you have, right? Like us taking cues from where anxieties are, where their fears are, right? And letting that tell us about what needs our attention and like what needs to shift and what's essentially taking us out of soul alignment, out of our joy, out of our peace, right? Because I feel like that's where there's so much juice and nuggets. I feel like if you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself, if you would use the word to describe yourself or describe situations of like, I feel a lot of pressure to do this, I can't not do it. It doesn't feel like an option to not do it. Probably would also describe like, I don't have freedom in my life. Like I don't have choice. And again, that's another extension of feeling like you're somehow like obligated to your responsibilities, right? Also a sense of over responsibility. That's definitely a childhood thing. I could do a whole episode on that because hello, I also dealt with that myself. And all of these things I'm saying, by the way, are things I've literally used to describe my own experience. So this is not a judgment. This could basically be an autobiography. Some other things too is that like if you get stuck in loops, like I would kind of like oscillate between two extremes. Either like I had no energy to do things I wanted to do and cue the self-shame, cue the really harsh inner critic. You're so terrible. You can't do this. Like it's not going to turn out well. Like you're so bad for like not doing this work, that would like beat me up, punish me for not doing it, even though I just didn't have the physical energy. Or I would get so locked into a task that hours and hours would go by and I would like forget to eat and I'd forget to drink because I just got locked into it. And like that was the only way that I could produce at this, level that I was telling myself I had to, which was arbitrary and self-assigned, but didn't really understand that at the time, right? Oscillating between those two things was a sign to me and is a sign to me and my clients that we're locked maybe in kind of like an unhealthy pattern as it relates to like where we're applying our energy and our ideas about our productivity. And ultimately, all of this I have found stems from what we're hinging our self-worth on and what we're hinging our safety on, right? Because when we really dig into those triggers, when we investigate what is it that we're so afraid of happening if we stop, if we rest, if we ask for help, is that we're afraid that the important things don't get done. And the thing that we're afraid of if those important things don't get done is that, again, like components of our life that we think make us safe, maybe like our income or something is not going to be there, or that maybe relationships that are important to us are going to go away because we're not performing in them in a certain way that we think that we should, right? So we think our ability to receive things that are important to us is contingent on how much like we kill ourselves working, which is a self-worth thing. Because if we believed we were worthy of it, regardless of our action, regardless of our performance, we wouldn't be kicked into this fear and anxiety cycle at the thought of not doing it in this quote unquote perfect way. So those are just some insights and some signals that you might have some like underlying beliefs or underlying fears that are propelling this pattern, are literally telling you that it's like life or death for you to keep going nonstop and keep driving you into this burnout cycle. And again, all of the supplements in the world can't heal your body if you continue to like choose to go into the same pattern, even if that's you choosing subconsciously. Danielle, what do you think about all of that?
I love it. Two things came to my mind. And the one thing I wanted to say is like, of course, like everyone's situation is different. Like I'm almost thinking, like I know a lot of moms out there, it's almost like you feel like you don't have a choice. So there's a lot of that, like you feel like you're almost trapped, like you don't have time for yourself. And this is such a big reoccurring theme that I see with clients. I find especially like parents, because they're giving so much of themselves away, it's like we almost forget what those things were that brought us joy. We almost have to like go back to like being a kid again. Like, do you like to paint? Do you like soccer? Like, what are the things that really light you up? What would it look like? And how much of that are you doing any given day, week, months? And oftentimes it's just like one of those things that's pushed to the wayside day after day after day. And you find joyful things in your day, but you're not nurturing your spirit. And I find that that's huge.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is because this was huge. Like I can self-coach myself to no end. I've been doing this for a long time and like working on my own self. And the reason I connected with you, Bree, you came on our podcast and while you were chatting, I'm like, I need to work with her. I need this. And I remember one of the things I said to you was like, I feel like I'm self-coaching myself. I can talk myself out of these negative mindsets and these limiting beliefs that I'm like conscious of. But I feel like an addict in the sense that I feel like I always there's periods, especially when I get overwhelmed or life gets full and busy, that I feel like I have to check myself like constantly. Like it's ridiculous how much I'm like checking myself because my tendency is to be like that version, that very like Capricorn driven, like pushing version of Danielle. And I can lose myself in it. Even though I'm like trying to check myself constantly, it's like frustrating that I have to check myself so much. So that's where you came in. And that's why working with you one-on-one and within Flowmaster, where you talk about all this stuff like so beautifully and like so many breakthroughs, it's like learning to see what's driving that tendency. Obviously, there's some stuff in the stars that like influence it for me too, but there is some stuff that, you know, just that I've learned through my upbringing that we all have, fears, worthiness stuff. It was really, really helpful for me because I know a lot of the physical stuff to be able to tap into like step into that realm because I felt like I was able to like just kick through these like shackles and it's like changing your being. And that's, I don't want it to sound complicated because it can be so much easier than you ever imagined. All of this, like it doesn't have to be like regimented diet overhaul, lifestyle overhaul, like all this like deep emotional work, because that can feel like a huge thing, but it could just be like the one little thing, right? Or the couple little things that make such a big difference that totally change your life and just make you a happier, better, more peaceful version of yourself. But who doesn't want that?
Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to say for anybody listening, it is really normal that like we can only see what we can see in ourselves and that it takes relationship, it takes other people reflecting things back to us for us to see like other unseen unconscious parts. Like that's literally the function of healing in relationships. That's one of the beauties of working with a therapist, a coach, whoever, of having relationships with people that are healthy where they can kind of show things back to you, is because the way that our consciousness works is that we literally need that. So please don't be like discouraged if you feel like you can only get so far with doing it by yourself and with yourself. That's literally the nature of things, is that again, sometimes we just need somebody to like say it back to us in a different way or ask us a question we never asked ourselves, or like propose a way for us to approach it that we hadn't tried before, for it to like unlock the whole thing or to like pull the rope that like pulls out the whole knot. And that's what I feel like was a big part of us working together. And there are two other things on that I wanted to say is one, you described that you knew how to talk yourself out of a negative place, which I think is a really helpful tool. Like if you know that you're in an energy that you don't like using tools to help you move towards an energy that you do want, so helpful, really important. That's not the only tool when we find ourselves triggered. It's also really important to have a skill set or a process where we can lean into the trigger, we can find its wisdom, we can receive it a little bit more as the way to get it to release. One is kind of like moving towards the energy that you want to get to how you want to feel. And the other one is like leaning into the trigger, like having to move through it so you can come out on the other side with it totally changed. Both have a time and place. And I feel like what we got to work on together was like teaching you the process and teaching you the value of, if I'm having a trigger that's coming up all the time that doesn't feel like I'm really effectively able to sort of like pep talk myself out of, that's probably a signal that that trigger needs me to work with it so that I can release it so things can change. And you were so open to that because of course you are, like, you're a coach yourself. I tend to find like healers and coaches just pick up on that really easy. So I want to give you a lot of credit on that. And I'll pause before I say my last thing in case you have any like thoughts or things you want to share about learning that process.
I feel like we just meshed really well together and you just knew how to ask the right questions. I honestly don't think I could have done it with anyone else. I just am so grateful.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I feel like what's really nice about being a coach who also can channel is that I connect with the guides. And of course, I have my own instincts that I feel like really set me up to do this work really well. And I just like, that's just one of my things. Like asking those kinds of questions has always been like one of my things. But the guides will also drop in my ear, like, this is what this is about. So like lean into that more. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So it creates a really fun, a really fun experience where we're like really touching on exactly the energy that's creating a little bit of the resistance and blocks. So that's really cool that you described that as well. But to just sort of bring it back to this concept of burnout, one of the last things I wanted to mention, which you also did, was that when you're not feeling joy and inspiration, like that's a signal you're probably in burnout energy. And even what I would call nervous system dysregulation, because I think what like in a society we would call burnout is like chronically being dysregulated in your nervous system, either being in a dorsal vagal, which is like a freeze response, or in a fight or flight, which is your parasympathetic response. Like being in those states for too long, one, depletes your body's resources and creates like legitimate adrenal fatigue and things like that. And two, what that does to like your mental and emotional state is really significant as well. And one of those symptoms is not feeling like you have like that openness or that happiness or that excitement about your life. It can kind of share some symptoms with feeling a little bit depressed. Like if you're really not happy about going to work every day and you feel like really resentful about it. Or again, like I work with so many moms. Of course you love your kids. Of course you're so happy to do things with them. But if you're kind of like feeling a lot of angst about what you're doing because you feel so tired and burnt out all the time, like there's also a little bit of like underlying resentment under there. And I just want you guys to know, if you're feeling resentment, it's not because you're a bad mom or because you actually don't like your kids or you don't like your job. It's because there's a message for you under the resentment that's just trying to get your attention. That's all it is. It doesn't mean anything bad about you. But anyway, if we're not feeling the joy, that's a signal that there's burnout. So kind of attending to your spirit and attending to your joy is one of the avenues that I find is most effective in trying to like shift out of that burnout energy, shift out of that productivity addiction, to shift out of that perfectionism, like all of those different words that kind of describe the same energy. Danielle, what are some of the things that you recommend to people as they try to consciously and intentionally connect with things that are joyful for them as a way to heal and move out of the burnout energy?
I love this question. One thing that's coming to my mind, and I'm thinking of like a recent client too, it's almost like when you're so tired and so burnt out and kind of just so fed up and overwhelmed, there's often like a hopelessness that goes along with that, especially if you've been really sick and tired for a long time. And I've worked with a lot of people like that. And sometimes it's like just about getting you up a little bit. And so it's nice to have different tools that we can call in to make other things easier when we're ready to bring them in. So you don't have to do all of these things at once, but that's where supplements can be nice, like the right supplements, just having like the right nourishment to build your bases up and just get you feeling a little bit physically better, and then bringing in little things in the lifestyle. But honestly, I do think like the joy and the fun is the best medicine. It's one of the first things I go to. And it's like all of this stuff that hasn't been fun, like this is your opportunity to start putting yourself first and actually have some fun. And like, let's do that first before we like go crazy with your diet, before we do all this, work on the other stuff. Like, what could it be? And it's almost like if you just ask, you're the expert at asking your guides and throwing questions out there, but you never know. Like, even I was thinking of it for myself, but, as a working mom, I can definitely see how I know the things that I like, but I'm not necessarily making the time for them. And I'm thinking like, what, in this new version that I am now of myself, like what is some hobbies that I could bring in with the time that I have? I was like, I'd love to do like, I walked by this pottery store randomly where people were like on the wheels with their headphones on, like getting messy. And I just thought like, that looks so healing. Like I need that. It could, and then it just shows I didn't do it yet, but it's on my list, but like answers present themselves to you. And you can figure out ways to make it work. But even like, honestly, it could be like putting on like a song that you love that like is a throwback to high school and like getting a little crazy and dancing around your living room for like 2 minutes, like just kind of who cares what anybody thinks? I think there's something about just like dancing or even like singing in the car, like little things that are moments for you. It could be grabbing a coffee or tea, like a little treat, like something that's going to light up your day and be a moment for you. And just like really like cozying into that and embracing more of them. I think that's like a really, really beautiful, fun place to start.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And what I'll offer to anybody who's maybe asking themselves that question of like, okay, how can I shift myself out of this energy that feels like it's so serious all the time? It's so stressful. Like I'm always feeling the pressure and I always got to go, go, go. I like the idea of things sounding more fun or being a little bit more relaxed or like having more time for myself. And like you're really trying to bridge that gap of how to get there. Here are some things I would recommend that you reflect on. Like, do you think that there is value and purpose in your pleasure? Or do you think that it's like self-indulgent? And I found for myself that my own beliefs, which is again why I love working with people and shifting their beliefs and like really healing and alchemizing the triggers, is that if I don't believe that me doing something that gives me joy or pleasure is value, if I don't believe it's important, of course, I'm not prioritizing it over these other tasks that I believe are really important. Like, of course I wouldn't, right? Shifting how I was looking at tasks or efforts to make things more joyful or pleasurable for me made it easier for me to actually make choices that brought more joy and pleasure into my life. So even like if it's a task that technically, if I was just looking at it from an efficiency perspective, I could go through in 5 minutes and like make it done, make it really quick. If there's a version of me doing that task that is more enjoyable, like the experience of doing it is more fun, but it takes me, I don't know, 15 minutes. I now, after doing a lot of this sort of trigger alchemy, belief shifting kind of work about it, I now know that there is so much value in me being in the energy of joy. It's healing to my body. It helps me manifest things like abundance and prosperity. It's literally me living the kind of experience that I want in my life. Like that is so valuable that it is worth it to me to use my time and energy for a little bit of like 10 extra minutes so that I'm getting something done that I needed to, but I'm also getting to feel the way that I actually want to feel. And I'm only able to do that because my belief system allows me to do that. So again, I would start to like reflect on like, do you assign any value or purpose to your own pleasure and joy? And if the answer is no, you got to start there. You got to start to wait, what purpose could there be? Like, how might this be important? How could this be just as important, if not more important, than all of these things I'm telling myself I have to do for other people? And my last thing from the guides, they just dropped this in my ear, is that they want to remind everybody that most of the time when they question why they are driving themselves into the ground to a place of burnout, it's because they want to create circumstances where they can feel relaxed and they can feel joyful. Like if you ask yourself, like, what am I doing it for? It's because I want to be able to be present with my kids. It's because I want to be able to enjoy my life. I want to be able to feel healthy. I want to be able to feel abundant. Like if you really investigated, like, what is this all for? It's because you're trying to get to a place where you feel peace. You're trying to get to a place where you feel great. But the lie, the sneaky part of that whole thing is that you never actually let yourself feel that way because you're telling yourself you constantly have to do more. So you're never getting the result that you want. But the only one that's preventing you from not feeling that experience is this belief that somehow you have to be miserable and work into the ground before you can let yourself feel that way. So again, I know some of the work that Danielle and I did together, and I know that she does with clients too, is like, what if you get to feel peace? What if you get to feel joy right now? And we learn to find a little bit more balance. So you didn't feel like you had to work yourself past your body's limits before you could ever get there. Again, creating physical, emotional experiences of burnout. Like, what if you got to like titrate like little pieces of joy, little pieces of peace, little pieces of abundance into your experience throughout the day? Naturally, what that does is kind of disengage the workaholic a little bit, right? Like, what if you got to have it now and you didn't torture yourself in the name of trying to feel it? Do you know what I mean?
I love it. We often say like, it's not what you do, it's how you do it, which I think like summarizes what you're saying like really well. But it reminds me of this. Eckhart Tolle said this in one of his books. It's like, if you're living in resistance to things, he calls that madness. And it's interesting. It's almost like a double-edged sword again, because when you start to get burnt out, the more suppressed your hormones are and the more burnt out you are on that scale we discussed earlier, it's like, it's natural to feel like less tolerance to everyday things. So it's easier to be in that like resistance more frequently. And that's where it becomes a double-edged sword. It's like, because you're not relaxing, you're doing the dishes, but you're like frustrated about it. Or you're doing the work on the computer, but you're not like, it could be look one way. It could look like you're listening to music, you have a nice tea and you're kind of like enjoying it, but instead you're just like frustrated and like really like trying to bang it out and just like annoyed by it. So if you can kind of almost like, he says you have three options in this scenario when you're living in like constant resistance. And one being like, you accept it, which can work in some cases, like you just accept it. Two, you have a conversation. So if it's like with a boss or somebody you're in a relationship with, like you have a conversation so it becomes something that's easier to accept. Or number three, you leave. And I think about this all the time. And the example I like to share is like, I used to commute when I used to live on one side of Toronto and I would commute the other side. And I just hated taking the streetcar every day. For whatever reasons, like I would just drag myself there with like a story in my mind. And I was like, I'm living in madness. Like, this is what Eckhart would say is like living in madness. So I need to like either change, like stop commuting this way, take the train, like do something different. And so I bought a bike. I bought a bike and I started biking. There were still days where I did take the same streetcar, but I just changed my thinking around it so that I wouldn't like be dragging my heels so much. Cause I was like, what am I doing? I know it's a simple example, but so many of us can live with that sort of thing day in and day out without even really realizing. So it's just kind of cool to have awareness of where the bits of resistance you might have day to day, and know that your level of burnout and the lack of self-care or maybe nervous system regulation behind that could be making it a lot worse as well. So it all ties together.
100%. Gosh, I love Eckhart Tolle. He's like very intellectual and like very cerebral, but he's so good. And thank you for sharing that concept. Gosh, I like can think of so many things in my life that related to. And I think ultimately, like if you take anything away from this conversation, one, maybe identifying that the reason why things feel harder and you feel exhausted is because you might be in one of those burnout stages. It's your body having a very natural physiological response to expecting it to do more than it had resources to do for a really long time. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you don't want it enough. It's like a very common and natural response to what's been going on. And two, that maybe there could be a lot of change in just creating more awareness and questioning what beliefs are driving you into a place that make you feel like you have to be doing the things that you have to do. Because you really don't have to be doing anything, but it can make sense that your belief system is making you feel that way. But sometimes our belief systems is what is generating our suffering. It's not really our circumstances. Again, it's how we're doing it, not necessarily what we're doing. If you're willing just to like get curious about those, if you're willing to investigate those a little bit, if you're open to shifting what those might be and starting to do things different because you're done feeling exhausted, you're done feeling resentful, you're done feeling like you have a short temper, like whatever those symptoms are for you. And like if you're ready to create that change to heal, then there can be a lot of change and healing, like literally physically in your body to start to feel better. Whether you're working with somebody like Danielle, who can help, again, do some like of that emotional mindset coaching as well as nutrition. If it's in her group, the Happy Hormone Club, getting some formal support and community around that. Or if it's working with somebody about like me to like really get to some of the trigger and the trauma and the beliefs and do some of that shifting and healing work. There is a version of this that can look and feel so different when you're ready to just change it up a little bit, because it can be more peaceful. It can be more joyful. I promise. And Danielle promises too. We've both been there.
We're here to have a good time.
Yes. Yes. And we deserve to have a good time. It does not have to be so hard.
The one thing I was going to say too, Brie, as we get closer into perimenopause, closer to menopause, our adrenals really pick up a lot of slack hormonally for the ovaries. So I think this is a really interesting takeaway that we all should just kind of have awareness about, because I mean, the best time to plant a tree, what was like 10 years ago, but like we're all working on, and I imagine a lot of your listeners out there are already doing some of this work on themselves anyways. But if we let this run rampant, it can really make that transition where our adrenals take over for a lot of the ovaries work so much more difficult. The symptoms that can arise hormonally as you get into menopause can be so much more exacerbated if your adrenals are already pretty depleted going into that. So a lot of this work, if we need that little like physical
motivation,
almost just kind of like that, yeah, that little motivation for setting ourselves up for like better long-term health and happiness and just like vibrancy, it's one of these things that it's going to not only make you feel better in this moment, but it's one of these really like nice nutritive things that you can do for your body long-term for greater health down the road. And I think that there's a lot of power there. So I just wanted to share that before we wrap up.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. I know we have a lot of listeners who like identify are in that stage of life. So if you felt either that transition has been a little bit more difficult, it might be because there's a little bit of like adrenal stress hormone component, in which I highly recommend maybe connecting with Danielle to learn more about that. Or if that's something that you are really interested in preparing yourself for to make it as easy as possible, it's good to know that there can be a direct impact to how that transition feels for you if our adrenals are already really depleted, which is fascinating to know. The human body is so miraculous. It's so fascinating.
It so is. And the adrenals are really cool.
Oh my gosh,
They're
I
our
love it.
resiliency glands. Like, so we gotta just love them up. And everything that we
Yes.
talked about today will support them. They'll just be loving this conversation. I know it.
Love that. The energy of our adrenals is so excited we're talking about this. Okay, for anybody who would be interested in working with you and getting connected with you, or maybe even the Happy Hormone Club, please tell us all of the ways that they can do that.
Yeah, thank you. So you can come find me personally on Instagram at Simply Nourished, or you can find me at the Happy Hormone Club. It's at happy.hormone.club. If you come find me at Simply Nourished, like all the links are there anyways, or you can search the Happy Hormone Club podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can check out our podcast there.
I love that. I will link all of those things in the show notes in case you guys are curious of following along. Thank you so much, Danielle, for coming today. I'm so glad you're able to share some of your insights and wisdom about this very, very, very common experience that most of us have, and your wisdom about how we can navigate it and how we can move out of it. I was so grateful to have your energy here today.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here. I really feel like when our two worlds come together, like anything is possible. It's just such a beautiful way to work holistically on our health and feel amazing. So it's just been an honor and a pleasure. And thank you so much for having me and for everybody who listened today.
Yes, thank you. Feel free to send us DMs with any big takeaways or really big ahas that you have. We love getting those. And with that, I'll see all of you next week for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode and for tuning in to Breakthroughs with Bree. Please share your favorite episodes with your friends and loved ones, and please like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, as it helps me continue to create these episodes to help support your breakthroughs. I would love to stay connected with you, so please follow me on social media at Healing with Bree. Please check out my website at healingwithbree.net, which will always have the most up-to-date information about the services that I'm currently offering. And please consider using the link in the show descriptions to subscribe to my email list so you can be the first to hear about any offerings and get all of the free resources that I offer, as well as get my weekly channeled messages. My deepest love and gratitude to you, and I can't wait to have more breakthroughs with you next week.